Halo 3 was the culmination of nearly 6 years of world building, storytelling and character development. It was what was meant to be the fitting end to a fantastic trilogy of games. It truly was a masterpiece of its time. However, let's take a step back and talk about me for a second. When Halo 3 first came out, I was 6 years old. Don't ask why 6-year-old me was wearing such formal attire, I have no idea. Now, I didn't get the game exactly when it came out. I think I got it a few months after the game's initial release, in late 2007 or early 2008, but that doesn't really matter. The point is, my little 6-year-old mind was completely blown by the sheer beauty of the game. I was used to playing Sonic or Star Fox, so when I finally got an Xbox 360 and booted up Halo 3, it was like a whole new world was being unraveled. The scale of each mission, the way it's structured, the design of the weapons, the way the enemies looked, it all had me completely fucking enthralled. Halo 3 was the first game I can remember truly getting immersed in, even if my memory is a bit foggy. It was 11 years ago, to be fair. I'll never forget the memory of playing Sierra 117 over and over and over again because I just loved the mission so much. It had such a good atmosphere with a build-up of tension, the environments were beautiful and the gunplay was absolutely superb. Although Halo 3 is way more than just a nostalgia trip. Even if it is difficult to not dust off the old rose-tinted glasses when playing a quote-unquote old game, I've recently played through the whole of Halo 3 and I couldn't help but analyse the game further than this is a game I enjoyed as a kid, as I was playing it. It really does still hold up today, and it's not just the graphics that remain impressive. The gunplay, level design, animations, weapons, enemy design, storytelling and soundtrack have all aged like a fine wine. Halo 3 really does stand the test of time, and it was the perfect game to end such a fantastic trilogy of beautifully crafted sci-fi, fantasy, first-person shooter games. Now, I may be slightly biased because this was the game that opened my eyes to a whole array of other video games. However, I'll try to be as unbiased as possible during this video and giving a true picture as to why Halo 3 was Halo at its best and that no other FPS will ever come close to it. By the time Halo 3 released, Bungie was no stranger to creating an in-depth experience with great mission structure, enemy placement, a variety of weapons, and fantastic subtle storytelling. Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2 were both incredibly successful and yielded stellar reviews. It's safe to say that people were incredibly excited for the next and supposedly final iteration of the legendary Halo franchise. The levels had to be grander, the weapons had to be more outrageous, the characters had to be more badass, and the story needed to reach its climax, hence the tagline, "Finish the fight." Something that Bungie was always great at doing was making the game feel bigger than the last, which is something that 343 Industries has yet to grasp. But I digress, we're here to celebrate the successes of Bungie's Halo games, not the inevitable failures of 343's. What I'm trying to say is they don't make games like this anymore. They don't make games that have such a strong sense of support and community. Halo 3 was the peak of Halo because it was when everyone was interconnected and united by the love for the franchise. Bungie made games for the fans, exceeded expectations, opposed to putting as little effort into the game as possible and charging full price for an unfinished skeleton of a game. Oh Bungie, how you've fallen from greatness. Halo 3 felt bigger, better, and more tense than any Halo game before it because we knew it was going to be the last Halo game in the original Master Chief trilogy, so they had to send Halo out with a bang. The game starts off so strong with Sierra 117, it takes place right after the events of Halo 2 when Chief is on the Prophet of Truth's ship above Earth. The game literally starts after Chief has jumped from the ship and landed in the jungles of Africa, where he's quickly found by UNSC Marines including Sergeant Major Johnson and the Arbiter, which causes a little bit of unrest considering the Arbiter was one of the main antagonists of Halo 2. This beginning scene is one of my favourite scenes in all video games. It's so simple but so effective. You think the Master Chief is dead until he replies to something that Johnson says. One of my favourite lines from the scene is what Major Johnson replies with.
We're not leaving him here.
Yeah, you're not.
Oh, crazy fool. Why do you always jump? One of these days, you're gonna land on something as stubborn as you are. And I don't do bits and pieces.
That line is a nice callback to the beginning of Halo 2 when he jumps out of Cairo Station with the Covenant nuke. It's also a good way to diffuse the tension slightly, and it also shows how thankful Johnson is that Chief survived as he scolds him playfully. Sierra 117 is the perfect starting mission because it's set on Earth, so it's not a confusing setting. It also allows the graphics to be shown off, such as the foliage, lighting, and texture qualities. It also allows players to get to grips with the way Halo 3's combat works. I know it's pretty much the same as the first two, however it feels slightly different given the tighter, more realistic animations. Sierra 117 doesn't have too many archetypes of enemies, they're just standard brutes, grunts, and jackals for the most part. However, they did include a brute chiefdom, which allows the player to familiarize themselves with this new type of enemy and new weapon, the gravity hammer. The only time we'd seen an enemy similar to this before Halo 3 was the final boss of Halo 2. This brute wielded the Fist of Rukt, which is basically a glorified gravity hammer, however the player couldn't wield it. Sierra 117 was the perfect mission to introduce old and new players to Halo 3, and the missions only got better from here on out. Most of Halo 3's missions consist of a similar array of enemies. You'll be fighting the Covenant for most of the game, however there are other enemies such as the Flood that come a little bit later on. I think playing on Legendary is the most fun way to play the Halo games. It really gives you a true challenge and makes you think about how exactly you're going to engage in each combat situation. You're constantly changing your weapons, taking cover, throwing grenades, and using equipment to stay alive, and I much prefer this to just simply gunning everything in your path down on normal difficulty. I know you're the Master Chief, and Halo is meant to be a classic power fantasy, however I do still like to feel as if every enemy poses a threat to me, even grunts. Playing on Legendary enhances every mission from what would originally be a complete walk in the park to a full-on war in which you need to be careful and strategize how you're going to attack. It also turns what would be a relaxed 5-hour experience into an action-packed 10-hour challenge depending on your skill. All enemies will be difficult whether you're fighting brutes, grunts, hunters, or those damn fucking sniper jackals. Every firefight needs to be thought about in detail right before you engage, and if you die, you learn what to do and what not to do. It's just an incredibly fun way to play in my opinion, and it makes the game an absolute blast. I think Halo 3 is an incredibly fun game on its own, however it's better when played on Legendary. The missions are just so much more enthralling and challenging. There's a few missions such as Savo Highway and the Storm that are a little less interesting and based mostly on vehicles, however there are fantastic missions like Floodgate, the Ark, the Covenant, Cortana, and Halo that are all absolutely encapsulating. I think my personal favourite mission in the whole game has got to be Cortana, because not only does it mean so much to the Chief to get Cortana off High Charity, but it is also such a simply badass premise for a mission. Chief flies completely alone to the breeding ground of the Flood and single-handedly walks in, takes back Cortana and escapes with his life. I never appreciated the mission as a kid. It was always too hard, the combat was too slow, and there was a severe lack of background music. But as I've matured, my appreciation for this mission has grown, and I see it in a completely different light. Cortana has a tension that no other mission in Halo 3 possesses. The Flood are at their strongest and most prepared in this mission, and it really shows, especially if you play on Legendary. There are Stalker Flood forms absolutely everywhere, and they constantly mutate into either the ranged or tank form, which can prove to be very problematic under certain circumstances. They're probably the main threat of the mission because they're so versatile. The mission Cortana also requires you to constantly pick up different weapon types. One minute you'll be using a shotgun and assault rifle, and the next you'll be using an energy sword and Covenant carbine. This keeps attention high, especially on higher difficulties, because you're always concerned about ammo and the weapons you're using. However, the beauty of this mission is not only in its design, but also in the story it conveys. Chief cares about Cortana enough to risk absolutely everything to go to High Charity and get her out himself. And when you do finally retrieve Cortana from her prison, she seems genuinely scarred by what she's seen in her time there, even if she is an AI. And to top it all off, right at the end as Chief is making his last stand before getting into the Pelican, the Arbiter shows up and helps you in the defense, which really shows the development of their friendship that Chief and the Arbiter made towards the beginning of the game. If I had to choose one mission to be my favourite in the whole of Halo 3, it's gotta be Cortana. However, every mission in Halo 3 is enjoyable. There wasn't one mission when I was replaying it that I groaned at when it loaded up. They're all so memorable and fun because they're designed so carefully by very skilled developers. Moments from missions like the Ark where the huge frigate comes down from the sky to provide support for the Chief, or the moment when the Arbiter finally kills the Prophet of Truth, or the legendary ending where Chief and Cortana are floating through deep space in the forward unto dawn. Moments like these are what made Halo 3 truly special for me. It paid off everything that was built up from the previous Halo stories, and with the Xbox 360's hardware they were able to create scenes of a much larger scale than what was possible in previous Halo games. From start to finish, Halo 3 is an absolute cinematic roller coaster that has impeccable timing and execution. Each mission is incredibly fun to play, and none of them feel like they don't have a place in the game. The mixture of unbridled action, subtle storytelling, character interaction, and payoffs are what make Halo 3 the true best Halo experience.
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
Halo 3 was the perfect end to Master Chief's original trilogy, and the stories, themes, and character arcs that were developed over the course of the 3 games were coming to a close. The great thing about Halo is that it always had a very subtle approach to story and lore. The main attraction for the majority of Halo's audience was the shooting, hitting, and blowing shit up as a badass super soldier. However, people did come to appreciate the deep storytelling that was actually present in all 3 of the original Halo games. It just wasn't in your face. Opposed to explaining everything to the player, there are hints dropped throughout each game or things that are mentioned as a passing comment that will be paid off in a later title. When I was a kid, I was unaware that Halo even had that much of a story, let alone a rich archive of lore and an in-depth narrative. Halo 3 was one of the last good story and gameplay driven FPS games, and ever since Bungie left Halo, so too did the fantastic way that the writers implemented the story into the games. An example of how Halo 3 subtly brings in new plot points that are paid off in later games is when the 343 Guilty Spark says to Chief,
"You are the child of my makers, inheritor of all they left behind. You are Forerunner. But this ring is mine."
This is mentioned completely offhand and with no further explanation or context, yet it turns out to be quite a large plot point in Halo 4. When the Librarian is talking to Chief, it turns out that he is in fact not human, but Forerunner, and that when the Librarian indexed mankind for repopulation, she made sure that the Chief would evolve the way he did, which is why he was the best of the best, not only because he was trained to be a Spartan, but also because he was created the way he was by the Librarian. Something so small and insignificant that was dropped in Halo 3 was actually a huge plot point for the whole of Halo 4, and Halo tends to do this a lot. What I'm saying is the story in Halo was always done in such a fantastic way. It allowed the player to engage in the story sections, however it didn't stop you from getting bored, as it didn't cut away from the action for too long. Now, I'm not saying that I don't like a good story in a game, because I definitely do. However, as far as Halo is concerned, I play the game more for the gameplay itself, although over the years I've really come to appreciate the story and lore of the Halo universe. Another example of how the writers of Halo are very subtle with the way they wrote the original trilogy goes right back to Halo Combat Evolved, in another scene with the Guilty Spark. Just as Chief is about to activate Halo's defenses, Cortana interrupts and tells Chief that the Halo rings will wipe out all sentient life. When Chief confronts the Guilty Spark about this, he says,
More or less. Technically, this installation's pulse has a maximum effective radius of 25,000 light years. But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life. Or at least any life with sufficient biomass to sustain the flood. But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you? We have followed outbreak containment procedure to the letter. You were with me each step of the way as we managed this crisis. Why would you hesitate to do what you've already done? Last time you asked me, if it were my choice, would I do it? Having had considerable time to ponder your query, my answer has not changed. There is no choice. We must activate the ring.
This is actually in reference to a piece of lore regarding a character named Bornstellar Makes Eternal Lasting, a Forerunner who was transformed into a copy of the Didact. He had the role of Supreme Commander of Forerunner war efforts against the Flood and the ongoing Forerunner Flood War. This took place, hundreds of thousands of years before the Halo series. Bornstellar was tasked with firing the Halo rings, and his companion Shakus, who he later designated as 343 Guilty Spark, had an exchange before they fired the rings. Bornstellar asked the newly appointed 343 Guilty Spark, "Now old friend, we have the most important job in history, perhaps in all time. You may very well outlast all of us here. You may see the new galaxy emerge. Tell me, Shakus, if it was your choice, after all we have seen and survived, would you fire the rings?" So it's possible that when the Librarian was laying seeds for mankind's rebirth, she placed the imprint of Bornstellar's genome on Chief so that one day Chief would be able to stop everything from happening again, and 343 Guilty Spark is referring to Chief as if he is Bornstellar. So this plot point was from a cutscene all the way back in Halo 1, and was finally paid off 11 years later in Halo 4, which I think is superb storytelling. Now I know we've kinda gone off track as this has nothing to do with Halo 3, however it's a great example of how Halo as a whole used to handle its storytelling. Also, I just want to mention that a whole video was made on this a few years back by a Halo follower. I was simply relaying the information for this video, so go and check his video out if you want. Halo's approach to storytelling in the original trilogy of games was fantastic. It was subtle enough that it didn't take away from the gameplay and bore the player, however it was also deep enough that people were able to really get into it and theorize what certain things could mean for future games. Sadly, in recent years, the story has taken a massive dip. The writing is way less in-depth than it used to be, and the stories are way less interesting. Let's not even talk about how 343 completely fucked up Cortana's character with Halo 5, like, what the fuck were they thinking? However, my criticisms of Halo 5 have probably been mentioned before in thousands of other videos, so there's really not much point in me echoing what everyone else is saying.
What are you?
I are die, who can teach you lesson.
If there's anything Halo 3 did right, it was the characters, even if it was a small cast. Characters like Chief, Cortana, Sergeant Johnson, Commander Keyes, and of course one of my personal favourites, the Arbiter, are such strong characters. I really like how Halo 3 builds on the Arbiter and Chief's relationship from Halo 2. At the end of Halo 2, they were still on relatively bad terms, despite working together. However, in Halo 3, they become allies, even friends in the end. I don't think there's as satisfying a moment as when the Arbiter finally takes his revenge on the Prophet of Truth after how he was treated by the Covenant as a whole in Halo 2. That scene in general is also great because after killing Truth, Gravemind turns on Chief and the Arbiter and they stand back to back ready to fight the Flood, which is a huge contrast to the beginning of the game where Chief is literally about to blow the Arbiter's brains out. The character development is absolutely beautiful, not to mention their final stand when they drive the Warthog safely off of Halo and into one of the hangars of the Forward into Dawn. The ending to Halo 3 is absolutely iconic. It really shows how far the Arbiter and Chief have come from when they first met in Halo 2, and I couldn't have asked for a more epic ending to a trilogy. Another character that stands out obviously is Cortana. She wasn't actually in Halo 3 much, however I quite liked this. Chief was very alone without Cortana there by his side, and them being apart allowed them both to develop more as characters. The Chief had to learn how to cooperate more with others because before he wasn't much of a talker, although he talks a lot more in Halo 3. Also, the fact that Cortana isn't there for the majority of the game really adds more emphasis to the mission Cortana, as I mentioned earlier. You know how much Cortana means to Chief. She's his companion and one of his best friends, despite her being an AI. And when you finally get her back, it feels normal again, almost like she never left in the first place. Cortana is an absolutely fantastic character in all 3 Halo games, and given the time she had to develop from the ending of Halo 2 to when you get her back in Halo 3, she knows a lot about the Flood and was almost tortured by the Gravemind to the point of rampancy. So she definitely seen her fair share of disturbing things. Cortana is a fantastic character. Halo simply wouldn't be Halo if it wasn't for her existence. And that finally brings us to the Master Chief himself. As a character, he is actually incredibly in-depth, despite not talking an awful lot or showing much emotion outright. Chief is pretty vulnerable in Halo 3 because he doesn't have Cortana with him for the majority of the game. The whole beginning of the game sets up the fact that Chief's arc will be about learning how to deal without having the convenience of Cortana, but also getting her back whilst also dealing with the Covenant and the Flood. Just standard Halo stuff, really. Being the strong silent type that Chief is, most people assume that he isn't actually a very interesting character. However, the fact that he rarely talks makes him more interesting. It means that everything he does say has way more importance because he deemed it necessary to make a comment about something. Like at the beginning when discussing Cortana's whereabouts with Sergeant Johnson.
Where is she, Chief? Where's Cortana?
Don't make a girl a promise if you know you can't keep it.
She stayed behind.
He could have easily just not responded to Sergeant Johnson and he would have got the message that Cortana was no longer with Chief. However, he does say something, showing that he cares about Johnson enough to inform him of the situation with Cortana, and also shows that he's very fond of Cortana too, because he seems genuinely upset that she's still on High Charity. I mean, why wouldn't he be? They were practically best friends, and they did have a strong companionship. Halo 3 definitely shows the human aspects of Chief and allows his character to flourish, but doesn't develop his character too much to the point that it changes him completely, which is exactly what Halo 4 and certainly 5 did. I don't mind Chief from the 343 games, like, he's fine I guess. However, I much prefer him in the original trilogy. He's just way more mysterious and ominous, and that makes him way more interesting in my opinion. The other characters such as Sergeant Johnson, Miranda Keyes, Artas Vadum, and the Monitor are all pretty good characters too. They serve their purpose well as expository characters that add to the experience and development of the main characters. Not really much I can say about them apart from the fact that they are strong, well fleshed out characters. Miranda Keyes is definitely one of the weaker characters, however I'll give her a pass because she does have her moments. I think the best side characters, if you can call them that, are the 2 villains of Halo 3. First, we have the Prophet of Truth, who does pose quite a threat to Chief, Arbiter, and other supporting characters. However, the true villain is the Gravemind. It always has been. It was never the Covenant, really. Let's start off by talking about the Prophet of Truth. So as a character, I really liked him. He's the one that has eluded Chief since Halo 2, so he's had some nice time to develop. However, he was always absolutely insane, believing that the Halo rings would be salvation. I love Terrence Stamp's performance of the character, especially in the scene in the Covenant when he's just ranting in a fit of rage before being stabbed in the back by the Arbiter. This scene always stuck with me because he was being slowly eaten from the inside by the Flood, whilst also trying to rant about prophecies or destiny or some other nonsense. He was just simply insane. insane, and I think that's what made his character so menacing. Plus, he had control over the whole of the Covenant. He was a pretty powerful dude. The Gravemind, on the other hand, is the true villain of Halo. The Prophet of Truth was basically a puppet used to distract the UNSC from the amassing Flood forces. The Gravemind is a pretty menacing villain, as seen in the cutscene of Halo 2 Anniversary, and it's a near omniscient creature and has full control over all Flood forms. It's comprised of thousands of bodies and contains all of those bodies' memories and experiences, meaning it learns from what it absorbs, which makes it even more dangerous. So it's safe to say that the Covenant was definitely the least of Chief's worries in Halo 3, and the Gravemind definitely takes the cake for the main villain. I really like how the Gravemind talks in rhymes. It's just a whole lot more chilling, and I really think it fits its character. I also really love the sections in Cortana. Yes, I'm referencing this mission again, where the Gravemind and Cortana are fighting for control over what Chief hears. Cortana talks to Chief throughout the game, however during Cortana and a few other missions, the Gravemind talks directly to Chief too. Gravemind was an immensely powerful being, and to see Chief still come out on top despite all the odds was just a really badass thing to see. And isn't that what games used to be about? The Halo 3 characters were at their peak. They had time to progress over the course of 2 previous games, and given the fact that Bungie wanted this to be the last Halo game, they all either went out with a bang or their stories were concluded nicely. The success of these characters can be attributed to the fantastic writers at Bungie and the actors that brought the characters to life. They really did a great job. Halo has always had an amazing soundtrack, however I think Halo 3 is the pinnacle of Halo's music. I know I very rarely mention the music used in games in these videos, however I just had to with Halo 3, as it was the first game that made me appreciate the music in a video game. Before I played this game when I was around 7 years old, music in games was simply background noise that never concerned me. But when I played Halo 3, I distinctly remember sitting on the main menu and not jumping straight into the game just to hear the main menu music for longer, or restarting a new campaign each day and hearing that first piece of music that plays when Cortana is talking about Master Chief. Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatori, who composed the Halo 3 soundtrack, are absolutely genius and are masters of their craft. The music in Halo 3 always conveys the perfect emotions in the sections each piece of music is played in. Take the piece of music released for example. It's a good mixture of awe-inspiring vocals, stringed instruments, and percussion. The song begins with the softer instruments such as violins and vocals, whereas towards the end of the song there's more percussion, showing the contrast between the beauty of Earth, as this mission takes place on Earth, and the urgency of the Human Covenant War. Only to bring back all of the elements of the music at the end of the piece to show that the Earth's beauty is why winning the war is so important. Another piece of music I think is fantastic is Dread Intrusion. It plays when the Flood first shows up on the Earth in the mission Floodgate, and it almost fills you with a sense of impending doom, like there's something much worse than the Covenant that you have to worry about. And there certainly is, given the fact that the Flood is the main enemy of the Halo franchise. There's so much great music in Halo 3 that brings me right back to the glory days of 2007. I cannot hope to analyze and praise each track in the game, however if I were to pick a favourite, it's gotta be Tribute from the ending of the game, after the war, when the Arbiter is standing by the memorial to all those lost. The piece of music is so bittersweet. It starts off with the theme of military and victory. Humanity did win after all, but halfway through the piece of music it becomes very slow and melodic, showing exactly what humanity lost during the war, leaving you questioning whether all of it was worth it or not. I think the scenery, the music, the speech from Lord Hood, and the beautiful orange sunset in the background completely makes this scene. I also love the fact that when Lord Hood says, "Hard to believe he's gone," the Arbiter replies, "Were it so easy." This shows the Arbiter's character development through the game. At the beginning when Chief holds the Magnum to the Arbiter's head, he says, "Were it so easy," meaning, it's gonna be harder than that for you to kill me. And he means the same when he says it in the end, only in regards to Chief. It's gonna be harder than that for anyone to kill the Master Chief. It shows how the Arbiter knows he must still be out there somewhere, and that he almost admires Chief for being so strong. Anyway, the piece of music that plays during this scene is so great because it provides closure. It's not some epic battle music, it's not even necessarily sad, it's just melancholy, which makes it so much more effective in my opinion. It's such an emotional piece of music, not because it's actually sad, but because it signified the end of Halo as we knew it.
Oh, shit! We're not gonna level up after this! My life is over! This is such a big deal! Fucking great! Such a way to go, you idiot! We might not level up after this match! You know you're...
As we know, Halo isn't just about the amazing campaign, characters or music. It's also very heavily focused around the fantastic multiplayer component that the entire Halo community was built upon. Halo 3's multiplayer is the best multiplayer experience I've had in any game. Not just the best multiplayer experience in any FPS, no, in any game. Halo 3 had so many different playlists and game modes, which meant you could basically never run out of content. There was Team Slayer, which is your standard team deathmatch-esque mode, Lone Wolf, which is free-for-all, Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Team SWAT, Team Doubles, and so many more game modes. The great thing about Halo multiplayer is that Bungie was excellent at balancing it, be weapons, vehicles, or maps. They were amazing at designing things that worked great in a multiplayer component. Most maps are pretty symmetrical and have different layers to them. Blackout is a fantastic example of a Halo 3 map that has a 3-level system. The upper level of this map is where there will most likely be the mid to long range encounters, the mid level is where you'll be getting into many mid to close range encounters, and the bottom layer of the map allows for close range encounters. And this is the same for many of the maps in Halo. This map design allowed Bungie to place appropriate weapons around the map too, which allowed players to engage each other at the right distances with the right weapons, which led to near perfect balancing. In Halo 3 there were no loadouts where you could spawn with Covenant weapons that may or may not be better than your opponent's weapons. In most game modes everyone started out with an assault rifle and a magnum, and that was it. Various other weapons were scattered around the map for you to find. Some would be alright weapons that are simply better than your starting weapons, or they could be power weapons like a shotgun, energy sword, gravity hammer, or rocket launcher. However, a skilled player could use any weapon on the map and mow people down because they have knowledge of the weapons and are genuinely good at the game. A combo that I used to use back in the day was plasma pistol and battle rifle. All I'd need to do is charge the plasma pistol, shoot someone so their shields are down, and then shoot them with one burst from the battle rifle and they'd be dead. I used this combo while playing recently and it worked exactly how I remember it. And it isn't like it's cheating either. The plasma pistol was in the exact same location on the map for both of us, and we both spawned with battle rifles. It's just that I got to the weapon first, and I knew that this would be a deadly combination if used right, which is why Halo 3's multiplayer is so good. It's fair. While I did play a lot of Slayer, Lone Wolf, King of the Hill, etc. in my time playing Halo 3, I know the thing that overshadowed everything else in the multiplayer was custom games, specifically the Infection variants of custom games. Infection has always been a popular game mode in Halo. It's just so fun to fight off hordes of players throwing themselves at you in an attempt to take you down, get to the next round so they can have a shot at surviving. The community saw Infection as an opportunity to create some really innovative game modes too that use the Infection game mode as a base. Game modes like Normal Infection, Duck Hunt, Fat Kid, Cops and Robbers, Hide and Seek, and Sandtrap Zombies. One of the most memorable custom games experience I've ever had was when I played Duck Hunt with my brother and a bunch of his friends on Xbox Live. Duck Hunt consisted of 2 teams. One team was positioned in a high up box that they couldn't get out of. This team consisted usually of 1 player. The other team was full of yellow coloured Spartans, to show that they're ducks, who were only equipped with a bubble shield and had to run around a huge obstacle course, always taking cover because the hunter was trying to shoot you with their sniper. You had a certain amount of lives before you were then dead forever and had to wait until the next round. I have really vivid memories of playing split screen Halo 3 and just playing hours upon hours of Duck Hunt on custom games. It was so fun. Another game mode we played was Fat Kid, in which there was a huge winding corridor that was filled with weapons, upgrades, turrets, and obstacles. There was one alpha infected that was almost completely invincible. However, it moved very slowly and was equipped with a gravity hammer, meaning that you had to just keep your distance and you should be fine. However, if you get killed by the Fat Kid, you'd be turned into a regular fast-moving infected equipped with an energy sword. However, you died very quickly. This meant that the humans who were trying to survive had to make sure they did enough damage to the Fat Kid before it got to the end of the obstacle course, whilst also dealing with the normal infected that would throw themselves at you in an attempt to get the alpha infected to the end. I remember this game mode so vividly too. Most of the great Forge maps and game modes in Halo 3 were made in Foundry, and I remember them so fondly. Infected was a fantastic game mode and contributed to the majority of my time spent in custom games, and in Halo multiplayer in general. However, it's not the only thing I remember playing in the multiplayer component of Halo 3. One of my favourite game modes in the whole of Halo 3 was Griffball. I would play this game mode for hours and hours and hours. I still remember the day it was added to the playlist in Halo 3. It was a completely new concept to me. It wasn't overly competitive and you didn't have to think about it much. All you did was smash with the gravity hammer, slice with an energy sword, or grab the ball and make your way to the opposing side to score. It was just a generally fun game mode and was fun to play if you just played hours of Infection or Slayer. If you just wanted to sit back and relax, and you would play Griffball just to pass the time and have some fun. Halo 3 multiplayer was easily the best in the series. It's my personal favourite anyway. Game modes were fun, but most of all the custom games were at their most creative. Halo 5 may have way more possibilities when it comes to custom games, however Halo 3 was when the community was at its tightest, and Bungie cultivated this community through Halo 3's fantastic multiplayer system that brought players together. In my whole time playing video games, Halo 3 multiplayer is the experience that I can still look back at with many fond memories, remembering a time in which everyone played Halo 3 with their friends and just had the best time ever. Halo 3 is an incredibly special game to me. It's the first game that I got truly invested in terms of story, gameplay, community, and multiplayer. I can't remember the last time I played such an all-round fantastic game that has as much replay value as Halo 3. Hell, even after Halo Reach came out, 4 years after Halo 3 initially released, I still found myself going back to Halo 3 every now and then to relive the glory days. I still do, hence why I'm writing this video. Nothing will ever come close to the experiences I had on Halo 3, and I'm sure many of you are in agreement. Not even the Master Chief Collection is able to fully capture what I loved about Halo 3, because the multiplayer component is severely lacking, and there's nowhere near as many people playing Halo nowadays as there was back in 07. I'm just glad I was able to experience the height of Halo 3 during its prime, and I have those memories of 8-year-old me playing Halo split screen all day in the summer. Halo may never be able to get back to what Halo 3 was, but I can always remember the best FPS of all time.